there, yeah.
I don't see us.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is Tuesday, February 18th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. And this is a meeting of the third Laguna Hills Board of Directors meeting. And we'll get started with this. Okay, would you please turn off your cell phones and stand with me and do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any media present? Okay, seeing none. Approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda? Yeah, okay, who?
I read something about taking 12C off.
Oh,
No, we are not.
okay, we're going to keep it. Yep,
No, we're not.
okay. All in favor of the agenda? Okay, are we voting electronic? Okay. All righty, good. We have two people absent today, Director Ingdahl and Director Bada, Director Bada's in India. Be there for a few more weeks, then I'll be back, personal business. And Director Ingdahl is sick. So, okay, do I hear approval of the minutes from January 21st, 2020, the regular open meeting? Okay,
I will second.
okay, we got 3 seconds here, so I guess, go ahead, Grant.
I see that the motion for John and, okay. The motions went through for the agenda. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Are you ready on the next one? Approval of the minutes? I think it was unanimous anyway. Okay, approval of the agenda. Okay, we did that. We're on approval of minutes. We did. He wants to get it recorded electronically here. Okay, onward. Report to the chair. I really don't have anything to report right now other than I was just on TV a little bit ago and talked a little bit about the alteration moratorium that we had recently and a little bit of what the board went through on that. And also unreported aggressive animal behavior attacks. So if you can get a clip of that, and it'll let you know a little bit more of what's happening throughout the community and a little bit what we have to deal with as a board. So that's all I wanted to cover in that. Let's go to open forum. Who do we have?
Robert Stace.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm in 2381 via Mariposa West. And what I want to address the board about, we're having an issue with our wash machines on the first and second level. They've leaked. They have mold behind the soap dispenser and inside the drum. Even leaving the door open, it doesn't matter. The old machines, back in 2018, the machines were supposed to all be replaced with pedestals, washers and dryers. Mm-hmm. On our first and second floor, they were not. They're old machines, they're 2011 or older. They have a problem with going out of balance frequently, which means the resident has to grab their wet clothes and go to a different level. or go to a laundromat. It's very annoying to them, and this has been going on a long time. No pedestals were ever installed on the first and second floor, only the third floor. So we'd like to get that resolved, if we could. On the third floor, we have a washer that is a heavy duty. It has a third power rinse, and those don't have any of the problems of going out of balance. What happens is they get out of balance with It's not overloading, they just go out of balance, and that's locked up. So then the resident has to, or I have to call into resident services to get them repaired, and it's just a nuisance.
Okay.
So
Now, all of these have been reported?
pardon me?
All
Yeah.
of these have been reported?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the machines are repaired frequently. Again, we had a leak from the second floor down to the first floor of one of the machines. How they fixed it was they took all the vinyl flooring out and put a coating in to stop the leaking from going one floor to another. But it's the machine's fault. So if we could get those machines replaced with the correct machine to eliminate the problems where they work properly, residents now are going out of the building and going to laundromats. It's gotten that severe. A lot of them are handicapped and frail, and they can't deal with it. So
Okay.
the machines are used, they're meant to last, according to Consumer Reports, about 11 years. Under heavy duty, they're supposed to last less than 8 years. And we're way beyond that. That's based on about 12,000 or 1,200 deals per year. We're running triple that. So if you could address it and get them replaced,
Okay.
and it's a simple thing. It's just there, but the heavy duty, I have a model number if you want it. That's the correct model number I can supply to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other speakers?
Hal Goldberg.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm Hal Goldberg. I live at 3056D Via Serena South. It's in cul-de-sac 306. And about a week and a half ago, I noticed that one of our really tall, beautiful silk oak trees had a red circle on it. And I didn't know what that is, so I called the landscape committee, and they said that that means it's going to be cut down. And I asked, why would you cut down this? I have a photograph of it, phenomenally beautiful 50-foot tall silk oak tree. And she said it was being cut down because someone wanted extra parking in our cul-de-sac. And I said, that didn't seem to make sense to me because we have an enormous amount of parking spaces since they took away all the red curbs a few years ago. We have empty car spaces in the cul-de-sac all over the place. So I was looking at the guidelines on how trees could be removed, and I didn't see one that said that because of extra parking. So I wondered if there's a way to rescind the decision to cut that tree down, because I don't think it really should be cut down for extra parking, which I don't think we need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Monica Hobson.
Monica Hobson, 3300B, and good morning. And I'm pursuing an old issue which still has not been resolved, and it's an old resolution, and it has not been corrected. And I was put in touch with the CEO, and we met, and I have not gotten a response. I mean, he wrote me, and I gave him an answer back. I need to get this resolved, and there's a lot of other errors in the resolutions when they're being approved.
Who did you get a result from?
Mr. Parker.
Oh, okay.
We have met, and he wrote a response, and I wrote the response back. So I hope he will discuss this. Other than that, is you're passing amendment to resolution, and the original resolution. I got the original resolution in front of me, and it had been confirmed by the former secretary, Mr. Baum. So somebody is making changes without authorization.
Okay, thank you.
That concludes our speakers.
Okay, anyone like to address these issues?
I would, please.
Okay, Lynn?
I'd like to address the washing machine issue. Just to let you know, there was no plan to replace all of the washing machines. We had 86 left over to be replaced at some point in time because we'd like to have pedestals. I have the same situation. I have a washing machine with no pedestal. I'm one of those 86 people. So just so you know, they did not replace them all. There was no plan to replace all the washers. So if you have issues with those washers, we're going to take a look at them. But I just wanted to let you know that it's across the board. We did not replace all the washing machines. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to address? Go ahead.
I wanted to just make a comment to Ms. Hobson. We've become, aware, we really appreciate your help in trying to get things corrected, and maybe this goes to Jeff Parker as well, but is there some way we can get a written outline of all the issues you've got concerns about so we can take them up at the board level and make sure they're getting dealt with one by one? I haven't seen a master list. I know you've got several. You may already have this under control, but just feel like we're getting a piece here and a piece there, and it would be nice to have a nice, comprehensive list of everything you're concerned about so we can nail it down and get you the satisfaction you're looking for. So Jeff, if you had comments on that, go ahead.
Certainly. Yes, to the board. Ms. Hobson's indicated some concerns she's had. We've met with the attorney for Third and gone over what is Scribner's corrections to minutes and stuff like that versus an action that needs to take care of. I think it's a difference of opinion. She's received our input, but we can continue to look at that if you'd like.
My only point being, let's make sure we're dealing with all of them. If we end up disagreeing on certain issues, that's something you'll have to decide if you're okay with. But I just want to make sure that you're not coming back and saying, wait, you didn't do these three, but you did these other three. Or are we getting you every response to all the issues you're looking for is my question. Even if they're not responses you're happy with, are we at least covering every question you have?
There's certain items which you said the Scrivener's errors. It's not a Scrivener's errors. It's an error in the number and the date of the actual meeting. The actual meeting did not take place on the day it was indicated in the resolution. So the resolution had been approved by the board and in error and needs to be corrected properly in the minutes. And this is corporation code.
But there's no other minutes. You're not coming back next month with 3 or 4 new ones. We've got them all. We at least know all your concerns, correct?
The one I'm referring to is one that had been approved, one particular one.
Okay, so we're down to 1. That's
And-
great. Just want to be sure we got the scope here. Thank you.
Okay, to Mr. Goldberg, would anybody like to address that? From Landscape Committee for Improvement? Or Siobhan?
I was just going to say that I will follow up with the landscape department.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our responses to the speakers. I'd like to back up a little bit and acknowledge, I think we have somebody from the media here. Is that correct? And what's your name, please? Rhett? Brooke. Okay, from the Globe. Okay, thank you. Okay, CEO and COO report, please.
Yes, to the chair and board members, I have 2 items. The first one was I wanted to announce that using the panel of interview panel and then one-on-one interviews, finally made a selection for our new security director, and that individual is Carlos Rojas. He comes to us from formerly a police chief in Santa Ana. He also went up, after leaving Santa Ana, went up to BART and was director of public safety for BART, and he retired from there, and he's going to be joining us as of next week. And as you know, Tim's retiring, and they're going to work together for about a week to make a nice transition, and Tim's been gracious enough to do that, and appreciate all the effort that Tim's done. And I think you're going to enjoy working with Carlos. Like I said, he has over 30 years of experience in public safety field. Mr. Rose has also been awarded Medal of Valor by the Santa Ana Police Department, his U.S. Customs Service, and the Federal Bar Association. He's a graduate of the FBI Academy, and he's done a lot of the public safety policing, community policing, where he's gotten neighborhoods involved, and he's also an instructor at Santa Ana College, so he's going to bring a great breadth of experience and knowledge to the organization, and a dynamic person too. So I'm looking forward to that.
When is Tim's last day, or has it been nailed down?
The end of the month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that next week, starting on the 24th, they'll transition that week.
And compliments to the headhunter because he gave us 6 great candidates. And it was tough to go through them. It really was. But it was nice to see that quality.
It's a real good response. The second one, I wanted to mention that it's in the mail. You should have gotten delivery of it, our new magazine, the Village Breeze. It has been mailed. We talked to the post office. Everybody should have gotten a copy. There are some buildings, I want to say, that where they don't put them in the slots. They actually put them in the bulk bins. So if you're in your building, look for these, pick one up, make sure that you get a copy of it, because it should be going out to every resident. As of this weekend, we got notice that pretty much everybody had received it. But if somebody hasn't gotten one in the mail, and you go down to your building and pick one up, or if you have an expectation you should get one in the mail, make sure you contact us, and we'll make sure we'll work with the post office to get it out there. So
One comment I had from
Sure.
a resident was that they had a door that probably had like wrought iron on it and then a screen behind it, and they doubled it over and just pushed it in. They didn't put it under or in a slot or anything like that.
we'll have to work with
And they were concerned that it was stretching that screen.
we'll work with the post office to let them know that,
Okay.
definitely.
Comment?
And I'll turn it over to Siobhan.
Oh, John,
Oh,
comment
you have a question?
before we get there?
Very, very impressive magazine. I read it cover to cover. It's set in there 6 times a year. Is that-
6 times a year,
Is that what
every
you're
other
gonna-
month. And we, again, about 64 pages, depending on content. We can expand it or contract it. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and we've said it before, is that we have a key sponsor, and that's Memorial Healthcare. So this isn't a cost that we've had to absorb with their sponsorship. We've been able to cover the cost of this. So it's a great addition to the community. And what's real important is when we was looking at our statistics, we have about 2,500 plus residents that do not use the internet, so getting this kind of information besides the breeze and using the internet, getting this hard copy out to people, because what it's going to have in it is not only a great map of the village, but also our recreation information. So we're cutting down costs of doing separate mailings and separate printings and putting it all in here and making it one comprehensive. So don't throw this away. Keep it until the next one shows up, because it has a lot of calendar information in there and a lot of information about the organization.
Good, thank you. Yeah, Reza?
Are you planning to use advertising in this publication or just pure publication of the information?
No, yeah. Eileen, I don't know if you wanted to come up and say a few words about that?
Sorry, I had to make you walk.
What's that, 10 steps towards 10,000? Yes, we will be accepting advertising. However, we do have a non-compete. It was part of the sponsorship. So it will be in any advertising arena other than direct competitor to Memorial Care. But there are lots of opportunities. We are not, I will say this right now, we are not set up to handle the type of advertising that you see perhaps like in the Globe, where somebody's advertising like a particular unit that's for sale. Institutional advertising for Milford is great, but just because of our timing, we're not set up for the kind of just turnaround stuff. But yes, in fact, we already had one paid advertiser in this issue without even trying.
So it's not in competition with Globe on this one?
We're completely different.
Okay.
This is the mouthpiece
Just-
for the VMS and for the boards, for yourselves. We can't handle club listings, again, just because of our timing. So those are things that really are more the Globe.
Yeah, I don't want people to rush into putting things in here that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I believe it's also, Wei Ming, is VMS actually contributing stuff to this too? Articles and things like that?
Yes, in the past, only the president of the 3 mutuals and the 50. But this month, the first month, Eileen contacted me and say, well, nobody knows what VMS do, so so she asked me to put one. So there's one article from VMS. I think we're going to continue with the information about VMS
Thank you. People have been asking
from the
about
board
that.
standpoint.
Yeah.
Steve, I got one question, please. I'm curious, it's a beautiful piece, it's got enormous amount of information for everybody to use, but any reaction from the real estate people?
Haven't heard from anybody yet, no. This is brand new.
Yeah,
It
right.
was right this weekend.
It's a beautiful
There was
piece.
a lot of information on social media over the weekend. Of course, we always have our gadflies, you know, they spent millions and they must have staffed up. And I'd love to speak to those people because we did not add one staff member. In fact, everybody worked really, really hard to get it done and added it to their workload. The only hard costs are the printing and the mailing, and those are all covered by the sponsorship. So, the response, I know there's people that are cynical about that, but I want to just compliment the staff that worked with me because they pulled a lot of late nights, but it's a labor of love, so.
Great.
I really want to compliment your department, did a great job.
Okay, Siobhan.
Tough act to follow. Honorable President, members of the board, just want to share a few quick announcements this morning. With the March 3rd primary fast approaching, I wanted to remind everyone of the new voting procedures. All registered voters should have received a mail-in ballot about February 3rd or thereafter. Ballots may be returned by mail and no postage is necessary. They can be deposited in a ballot box at any vote center or dropped off at a vote center without a ballot box. The closest 11-day vote center is Laguna Woods City Hall, and this is open from February 22nd to March 3rd. There will also be a 4-day vote center at Clubhouse 7, and this will be open from February 29th to March 3rd. If you prefer to vote in person, there are 188 vote centers in Orange County, and you are not restricted to any specific vote center. So please visit ocvote.com if you want a complete listing of the vote centers if you intend to vote in person.
Will we have like crawlers or anything like that?
Yes,
Deal
I
with
think,
Information here?
Yes, we will
in
do
the
that
village?
as well.
Okay.
And then similarly, the 2020 census will be heating up pretty soon. Between March 12th and 20th, households will receive a detailed mailing from the Census Bureau explaining how to respond to the census. Most of Laguna Woods will receive an internet choice mailing. This is a paper questionnaire with information about how to respond online or by telephone. Remaining areas of Laguna Woods will receive an internet first mailing. This includes information about how to respond online only. And if you don't respond to the paper questionnaire, you'll receive a follow-up contact by mid-April from the Census Bureau. So please be on the lookout for all the census information that will help you participate. The Community Center Fitness Center has new hours. They started on February 15th. The Monday through Friday hours will now be 5:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we're proud of this because this was a request received from some patrons requesting a time change, and we were able to accommodate that request to better serve our residents. And lastly, our General Services Department has accelerated the carport cleaning schedule due to some unseasonably windy weather that we've had so far this winter. So cleaning will now occur between today, February 18th, through Wednesday, April 8th. The schedule was mailed out in Friday's What's Up in the Village e-blast, and if you didn't receive that, it's also available on the website. So please be mindful that we were able to accelerate the schedule to meet our residents' needs.
Okay, any comments? Reza?
Is it possible that we put some communication about the body of census, the participation and impact on the community? Because it has profound impact on the community or participation in the census, because that's go with a lot of other perks that the government provide. So if we can publicize that, that would be great.
Sure, we've done a little bit of that already, but as the time comes closer, we will reiterate that. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, moving along to the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar? Is there a second? Okay, are we voting? Okay, who's missing here? See Doug? And, oh, there we go, 8. See, John Frankel?
Yeah, I voted about 5 times.
Okay. Okay, we got you then. That'd be 9 for yes.
Okay.
Okay. That takes care of item 10. Moving on to item 11. I know of no unfinished business. Unless somebody has something. Okay, hearing none, going on to 12. And we have recommendations here. Architectural Control and Standards Committee recommendation. And I'll turn this over to Lynn.
Good morning. Mrs. Patricia Poggi of 5123 Brazo is requesting board approval for variance for a non-standard solar panel installation to be installed on the flat roof area of her unit. The members' request to use their own private contractor to perform the roof tie-in work does not conform to the Third Mutual Standard 41 solar panels, one-story buildings, section 2.15. Additionally, the proposed curbing method is not an approved method for sealing PVC roof penetrations by the roof inspector. Due to previous moisture intrusion events within the community, utilizing this method causes the sealant to shrink over time, allowing moisture to penetrate the structural members supporting the solar array. Staff recommends denial of this request based on the proposal not meeting the mutual standards for solar panel installation, which would void the existing roof warranty for the building, which can create additional expense to the mutual. I make a motion to deny this request.
Is there a second? Okay, Robert, any comments? Okay, we can commence voting then. Okay, and John Frankel. Yeah, just give him your, a yes vote? Okay, there we go, got it. Okay, next, 12B, Landscape Committee recommendation.
The Landscape Committee reviewed a request for removal of one fine fern tree for a member at 5377A who cited the reasons as structural damage, stating that the tree is lifting the cement patio. The separation of the alteration tiles appeared to be caused by the settlement of the extended patio, a fairly common issue with extended patios and not attributable to the tree roots. Because the tree is too far from the patio to cause damage, and the damage that has occurred had nothing to do with the roots of the tree, the committee determined that the tree does not meet the tree removal guidelines established in Resolution 03-11-149. I move that we deny this request for tree removal and recommendation by staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Annie seconded it. Okay, discussion? Okay, commence voting, please. Okay, there we go. Got it. Okay, on to item 12C.
Okay, the next 5 resolutions, if approved, are going to be on a 28 days notice for member review and comments to comply with Civil Code 4360. And I want to tell you now that I have condensed these in abbreviated versions. I'm going to give you the abbreviated versions today. And all of our resolutions are going to be on the website once approved. The lease cap and lease waiting policy on number 12C. This is a resolution that will form the creation of a wait list when the number of approved leases reaches the 30% cap. We now have 1,830 units leased. No, that would make it 1830 units leased, excuse me. In October 2008, the board adopted a resolution which required that a maximum of 70% of the manors in Third be owner occupied at all times, and that a cap of 30% of the manors may be leased at any given time effective December 2008. This mutual's lease rate has trended at 27% for many years, but between January 2017 and December 2018, it crept up and has been hovering at 28% since October 19, which means that the number of leased manors has steadily risen and may soon reach the leasing cap. Planning forward, it is recommended that we establish a procedure which this proposed resolution provides to manage a wait list for excess lease requests beyond 30%. The cap on active leases enables owners and prospective owners to obtain more favorable rates for home loans and maintains a positive owner-tenant ratio within the community and stabilizes the pool of resident owner who are eligible to assist with the governance of Third Mutual. At the Resident Rules and Compliance Committee meeting on January the 15th, 2020, Director Parsons made a motion to approve this proposed policy with Ralph Engdahl seconding. The motion passed unanimously, and today, excuse me, and today you have this policy before you, and it has been reviewed by our attorney. Do I hear a motion to adopt this policy?
I'll make the motion. Second. Okay, just as, excuse me, some clarification. 3 weeks ago, I went through and did my own tally of where we were, and we were sitting at 28.1% leased units. As of the end of last week, I did another count, it's 28.2%. So as you can see, we're creeping up. You know, that's why we wanted to get this out before everybody, so that, especially the real estate agents, knew what was happening. So that's one of the reasons for pushing on this and working with it.
Okay, this will cover the issue if there is a request for purchase with intent to lease. That also, because this doesn't mention that it's a lease cap and lease waiting list. Does that include when somebody buy a new unit
Yes.
with intent to lease goes to that waiting list for purchase or just for leasing?
Yeah, if they're going to purchase something with the intent to lease, they need to, we put an extra step in here. If the real estate agent come over and check, or the potential buyer, check with our group in here, and they would find out where we are on the percentage list. And if we are already at the 30%, then they would go to a wait list, the bottom of a wait list. So that way they don't have to go through, put money down and waste a lot of time.
But they can purchase it and hold it if they want.
They could.
Okay,
Under
I just
certain
want to make sure
conditions,
that
yeah.
is, okay.
And we spent a lot of time with looking at grandfathering, looking at issues whereby we have snowbirds that are here 6 months, they leave 6 months. So that's all incorporated inside here. So any other board comments? And we have a speaker? That is incorporated. That is incorporated, yeah. Okay, Grant?
Annette Soul.
Okay, Annette? Can't recognize you with your hat on there.
I came from the garden, I'm sorry. I got to go back for today. Basically, I read this, and I have a couple questions. So if we're at 28.2% today, and 30 is our cap, and we have 1.8% to work with, and we have the exemption clause, I think we need to have our exemption bank has to have 1.5% in it at least, or 1.8. In other words, we almost have to do this effective immediately, because you have to allow for hardship. And so I think, you need to implement this now. Now, this is the same in another HOA. I have a house somewhere else, and they have the same restriction because it reached the 30% mark. And now we're down below 25%. And we took a little dip, and, the realtors hated it at first because we said you couldn't buy unless you were going to be an owner to move in. You couldn't buy to lease. That was a restriction on the one up there. And now prices are going up again, and basically for us, and basically we have owners coming in and buying in the community, and it has helped us all in terms of we were getting too close for insurance purposes and for all those other things. And they didn't do anything for grandfathering. If you bought in, I mean, everybody was subject to this across the board because they felt that the people that had bought in super early bought in at lower prices. You were penalizing the people that were going to be buying in, that could do this stuff. So they didn't do a grandfathering clause. But I just want to make sure that in your consideration that you have a bank, because you're going to have the people come in for exemptions, and you need to pull a percentage out and store it in that bank to cover that hardship exemptions. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was you have to have an implement date, because the other thing about the bank is you might have a spike of people that want to buy and get it rented before the implement date. So you have to be careful on that too. Those are just some considerations that we ran into, and I just wanted to share them with you. Thank you.
No, that's good. We did incorporate the grandfathering clause because there are some things embedded in law now about that. And also about exemption for hardship. That's built into it too. But this is good to know about the 1.5 or 1.8.
Because you don't want to go over
Sure.
it, because what you're going to do if you go over it, you're going to penalize the 70% that, for their own insurances and everything else. So you need to keep that in mind. That's
Good
all.
point.
Thank
Good
you.
point. Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, we're putting this on 28-day notification, so we're still available taking comments from anybody, which we welcome. That's the second comment that I've received. So good points. So anybody else that has anything, let us know. Okay, that's going on 28-day, so we don't have to take a vote on instituting that. Let's go on to item 12D, harassment policy.
All right. The purpose of the harassment policy is to set forth guidelines for harassment complaints received by Laguna Hills Mutual, documents defined by law, federal, California Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the final rule and our governing documents. While thirds governing documents do not directly address harassment, those actions which constitute harassment based on the above laws and guidelines would fall under the general prohibition against nuisances found in Article 3, Section 6 of third CC&Rs. And further, any acts of harassment that constitute a violation of law are expressly considered nuisance in violation of the governing documents. Harassment complaints will be investigated by compliance, and staff will evaluate the nature of the unwelcome conduct, the context in which the incidents occur, the severity, the scope, frequency, duration, and location of the conduct, and the relationships of the people involved. Third is authorized to take disciplinary action against any member who may be found in violation of the governing documents or whose unit or residence, tenants, or guests are found to be in violation of the governing documents. The board adoption at its December 19th meeting The board adopted this policy at its December 19th meeting and requested that the committee review it with legal counsel's updates. On January the 15th, 2020, the Resident Policy and Compliance Committee approved adoption of the harassment policy with legal counsel's updates. That's it.
Okay, just for some other clarification too that you might not have read. Excuse me. In your packet, agenda item 12B, page 5 of 9, under Department of Housing and Urban Development, on the final rule, the last sentence there I'd like to read to you. Pursuant to the guidelines, third is required to investigate all reported claims of potential harassment of members or residents and, as appropriate, take all action permitted under the governing documents to address such harassing behavior. And also in our documents, on page 7 of 9 under enforcement, the Board of Directors has a duty to investigate and impose, if appropriate, discipline as set forth in the governing documents. So our staff has worked with our legal counsel extensively on this. We pulled it a couple times, I know of, and rewrote some of it, and it should be in compliance with the law now. So this is on 28-day review. Do we have any speakers on this?
I'd like to get clarification, harassment against whom?
It can be resident on staff, staff on resident, or any of the mix.
Okay, staff is not included because we do not vote for staff. Staff works for the board. You can only implement harassment policy against board members, not against staff.
VMS has its own policy on this too, so you may need to get a copy of that. And that deals with staff primarily.
Because the information I have from VMS, it's VMS handles staff complaints, not the board.
For the most part, yeah. And then we look at their recommendations if it comes to us. Okay? So it's a two-way street. It's not just one-sided. So if you can get a copy of that from VMS, then you can compare the two.
Can we get copies of that? Because,
Wei Ming's right behind you there.
thank you.
Okay.
Steve?
Yes.
I think this should be clear that we're talking about resident to residents, resident to staff, but the staff to staff is a separate harassment policy internal to VMS.
You're right.
So there are two separate issues. That's how the address is. Resident to resident, resident to staff is separate with VMS.
Okay, and staff to resident, how's that?
It's the same thing. Staff to resident or resident to staff handled by this board.
Yeah. This was made up as a counterpart to what VMS came up with.
Correct.
Which was from the staff point of view. And now this is a counterbalance looking at resident and things like that. So if you put the two together, you should have a good package. Okay, item 12E.
Okay, nuisance policy. The member discipline process is coordinated by the Compliance Department. Violations of this policy may include, but not be limited to, behavior, disturbance, noise, odors, visual, like draping articles over balcony rails, vehicles in parking spaces, clutter, health and safety, hard surface flooring, neighbor disputes, and violation of federal or state laws or local ordinance. Upon notice of a violation, staff investigates, and should staff identify objective evidence of a violation by member or their guests, staff will send a courtesy notice to the offending party describing the allegations and the disciplinary action that may ensue if not corrected. Staff then monitors the situation, and if compliance is not achieved, it will send a final notice requesting compliance. Additionally, the matter is scheduled for a disciplinary hearing with the Board of Directors determine if member discipline is merited. No further action is required if the alleged violation is resolved. On December 2nd, 2019, the Resident Policy and Compliance Committee approved adoption of this nuisance policy. On December the 17th, 2019, the board requested that the committee review has recognized the need for this policy and has set forth guidelines for nuisance committee review with legal counsel's updates. On January the 15th, 2020, the Resident Policy and Compliance Committee approved adoption of the nuisance policy with legal counsel's updates. This is up for 28 days for member review and comment to comply with Civil Code 4360.
Thank you, Lynn. And like she said, any comments that anybody has, please send them in to us. Okay, item 12F.
Okay, resolution for a good standing policy. This board introduced a good standing policy resolution in September and placed it on a 28-day review when subsequently Governor Newsom introduced SB 323 pertaining to common interest development elections into law. This law imposes new burdens on the election process with regard to qualifications of candidates and the procedures to be followed when electing directors. As a result, the proposed good standing policy has been updated to reflect new legislation. The term good standing has been used colloquially by the mutual and the board in reference to members who are not in violation of the governing documents. Despite the general use of this term and references made to same in the governing documents, there are no formal comprehensive definition of good standing or accompanying description of consequences of good standing by a member. The proposed good standing policy provides the definition of good standing and the implications of the same and would incorporate such definition into the operating rules as a part of the governing documents. The meaning of good standing in this context is as follows: not delinquent in payment of any assessment of related charge to the mutual, not currently in violation of the provisions of the governing documents, and not currently subject to disciplinary action imposed by the board of directors or a committee thereof after a duly noticed hearing. More than 30 days delinquent on payment of any sums due to the mutual or have a fine imposed by the mutual in excess of $100 as of the date of the distribution of ballots for voting on any matter involved in a non-subject election shall be eligible to vote in such election and will not be eligible for election to the board of directors. A member not in good standing will not be eligible to serve on the board. In accordance with SB 323, the mutual may not suspend a member's voting rights for any election/vote subject to Civil Code 5100 and the mutual's election rules as a disciplinary measure or otherwise restrict a member from voting in any subject election unless the member was not a member at the time voting ballots were distributed. Matters that must be considered in a subject election include the election and removal of directors, special assessments over 5% or regular assessments over 20%, amendments to the governing documents, and grant exclusive use of common area property. A member more than 30 days delinquent on the payment of any sums due to the mutual shall be ineligible to vote, nor will he or she be eligible to be a candidate for the board of directors. This resolution will be on a 28-day member review and comment to comply with Civil Code 4360.
Thank you, Lynn. A lot of this is being driven by Sacramento, and we've had to have it rewritten, I think, a couple times.
Yeah, we have.
And we pulled it a few times. Okay, any comments on this by the board? Okay, we'll go on to item 12G.
All right, election rules. Again, we're working through the rules of Sacramento. On May the 16th, 2006, the board established election rules to align with changes in California's civil code. The new civil code required procedures for appointments of inspectors of election, voting by secret ballot and proxy, ballot instructions, publication of election results, retention of ballots, and deadline for mailing of ballots, Resolution 030625. Since then, the election rules have been revised and approved by the board on one other occasion to comport with the current civil code requirements at the time. That was Resolution 031403. On October 2019, new California state legislation changes to election requirements for common interest developments passed, which is now known as Senate Bill 323 and went into effect January 1, 2020. This required changes to the current election process. These updates include, but not limited to, allowing all members the opportunity to vote, even if they have a delinquent account, allowing a general power of attorney to vote. An inspector of elections must send follow notice requirements and include specific language to the notices sent to the membership. On January the 15th, 2020, the Resident Policy and Compliance Committee approved adoption of the election rules with clarification from legal counsel. Director Parsons moved and Director Engdahl seconded that motion, which was unanimously approved in favor of the new election rules, and directed staff to seek clarifying language from legal counsel, which they did. Counsel advised that in Section 3, as to qualification of candidates and directors declared of sound mind, is legal terminology having to do with mental capacity to make legal decisions to enter contracts. Again, this resolution is up for 28 days for member review and comment.
Thank you, Lynn. I would ask staff if they would on their staff report, the title there, Resident Policy and Compliance Task Force, please change that to committee. Probably just an oversight. Okay, anybody have any comments on this? Okay, go.
I'm over on page 13 of 16, number E. It says the inspector has the authority to confer with the association's legal counsel. If I remember last week, it was a matter that nobody was to go to legal counsel unless it was approved by you personally. And that's the only thing I picked out of it.
Yeah, I'd like to know about it before anybody does that, for a point of clarification. Not necessarily to stop it, but just so I know what's happening with it. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay, this goes on 28-day. Okay, let's go on to committee reports. Financial report, Director Pearlstein.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to walk through the financials through year-end 2019, and there should be some slides that go along with this that I can walk us through. So, and you've got them in your agenda packets if you want to follow along under item number 13. So, we'll start with the big picture, which shows the total revenue and expenses for the year. Assessment revenue was $32,227,000. Non-assessment revenue, which we'll break down and tell you a little bit about what comprises that in other slides, was $2.5 million, just under $2.6 million. Add those two together, total revenue, $34,818,000. Total expenses, $35,237,000, for a net expense for the year of $419,000. So we paid out a little more than we took in for the entire year. And we want to walk through and break that down and show you what we expected and what we are looking to do next year to stay in line with our budget, even better than this year. So we'll do that by moving on to slide 2. And this breaks down revenue and expenses strictly from operations, day-to-day, sort of running the village as opposed to our maintenance and big projects for repairs that are in our reserves. So the assessment revenue from operations was $18,767,000. Non-assessment revenue of $1,912,000. Add those two together, you get $20,679,000. Total expenses, $20,641,000. And for the month of December, as of December 31st, we had operating surplus of $38,000. So operations ran pretty much in line with our expectations through the year, and so that's very positive. Certainly trying to continue to look for ways to control costs, but at least we're getting very accurate in our budgeting, and that's a positive. So now we'll get to some of the details that I think will probably mean a lot more to you about how we operated and where we're hoping to go for 2020 and beyond. So if we move to slide 3. So you can take a look, and I won't read every number again, but you can kind of see the total revenue was right on budget. Non-assessment revenue, we had significantly more, $923,000 of non-assessment revenue versus what we had budgeted, and most of that was due to our chargeable services program. There was some additional interest income, but our very successful chargeable services program that a lot of our residents are using generated a lot of additional revenue for Third Mutual. There's obviously expenses that go against that, but that's not in that line item. So the total revenue was almost $1 million more than expected for the year. Total expenses were a little bit higher. I shouldn't say a little bit. It's $35,237,000 versus $34,718,000 for a variance of $519,000. And then getting to the number that I think will mean something to you, and that is, while we had a net expense for the year of $419,000, our budget was for a net expense of $823,000. So most of the expenses that occurred were anticipated. There's pluses and minuses, a few surprises we're going to outline for you as we go further in this discussion. But overall, things went a little better than expected, and we're hoping to build on that for 2020. So if we could take a look at the next slide, let's talk about some specific areas so you can see where we were, where we are, and what we're hoping to really try to get more on top of for our board and for the community, really in terms of communication more than anything. I mean, the operations ran kind of as expected. It's getting the information timely that I think is something we're trying to improve on. So you can see the fees and charges, we had a $620,000 excess of what we expected. And again, those were primarily chargeable services. The maintenance work for moisture intrusion. I'm looking at some of the notes here. We had a lot of water issues, mostly leaks that happened early in the year, and so that put us in a position where we had a lot of charges that were more than we expected. Employee compensation was about $500,000 off of the projection, and investment income, I mentioned that was more. Let me jump back to the fees and charges. There's some misinformation there. I mean, the idea is we were under budget meaning we didn't spend as much as we intended to of 620,000 on that. That's how this chart reads anyway. So now let's look at some of the ones where we overspent versus what we expected on the bottom part of this chart. And the biggest one that changed a lot, if you've been following us every month, we really try to stay on top of how we're compared to our budget in big dollars. And our budget operates month by month on an equal basis, but we don't do projects that way. So we had a very significant payout in December of expenses that took us from a decent-sized surplus to a deficit. So we dug into it, wanted to get some answers for this presentation, and most of it, as I said, was this is where the water intrusion came into play. There was a lot of things that were performed earlier in the year that didn't get paid till towards the end of the year. These are the kind of things that we're talking to staff about and working on during the budgeting process. So and prior board members have mentioned this in prior meetings, we want to get this information to you way more in real time than at the year end, how did it all go? So ideally, we'd like to uncover some of this in September, October, November. And we did. We said, don't expect these surpluses to last, but it'd be nice to be able to share a little more accurate data. It's a big goal of ours for this year. The gain, loss on sale or trade, I want to mention a little bit about that. We talked extensively in our finance committee and in prior meetings. We moved our investments to Fidelity to be managed by a more service-oriented outfit. We sold some of our investments to go into different fixed income funds that just as safe but offered a higher potential yield, which has proved out so far, by the way. But because of some prior losses that were on the books, those had to get recognized when those assets were sold. So this is 100% a paper loss. This was not real money that we had in our account. We no longer have it. This is simply what was on the financial statements that had to be corrected once those assets were sold. So why do I bring it up that way? Because that would have made our net deficit $356,000 less, meaning we almost would have broken even on our budget, whereas our budget was $800,000 to the negative. We almost came up with a zero minus this one book entry. So that's kind of a positive. I still feel the same way that we want to get more on top of this information earlier in the year, and we plan to bring that to you. Uncollectible accounts, that was something where we have a couple of unique cases that have large reserves for uncollectible accounts. So that's something we think we've got under control. It could happen again, but we have been way more diligent about managing it. And outside of those couple of one-case things where they're big dollars, we don't have anything that's showing up that's a high risk, so we're happy about that. And then insurance showed up towards the end of the year. You may have heard that if you came to our finance meetings. We talked about it in the board meetings. It's become way more difficult to get insurance for property. Fire risk is much greater from the insurance company's perspective. That threw us into a $200,000 deficit for 2019. It's an issue we're attacking aggressively in 2020. Do not have it fully solved, but we intend to be offering updates by mid-year on that. And hopefully that'll stay under control, or we'll have to budget for it or find monies in other areas to offset it. So you haven't heard about a lot of big new projects going on at Third Mutual during the last 6 months, and I think it's a real testament to the board and the vision that we want to get everything under control, and we see these surprises that are hitting, and we're reserved and taken care of for them. So overall, financially, I definitely argue it's a really good report. We just want to get answers quicker that we think will be more meaningful to our residents. So let's take a look on slide 5. And you can kind of see some of this in a pie chart that really paints the picture. So I mentioned non-assessment revenues, fairly significant at $2,590,000. But as you can see, most of that's interest income, and that could be repeatable, meaning we should see additional income each year that's offering extra funds to pay expenses. But the fees and charges to residents, that's our chargeable services program. And like I said, we can't be using that to fund other needs for Third Mutual because those expenses are to help residents when they pay for chargeable services. So keep that in mind. In other words, when you're saying, wait, there's $3 million, why isn't that helping lower our assessment? It's important to break it down and understand how the pie chart really works. So you can take a look at some of the other fees that we do assess, and they do generate revenue. None of them very significant, but processing fees for leases, laundry, things of that nature. And I mentioned, it's a year-end report, so I'll try to dig a little deeper for you. We hear the concerns about laundry. We're talking about various options. We want to get the washers improved for situations that got brought up earlier. We want to talk about offering more time. There's a lot of things that we need to look at, but remember, it's all tied into a budget. So to give you all kinds of extra benefits and raise your assessments and to offset that is not necessarily the best way to do it. We'd like to find ways to work within a budget and still offer as much as we can. So we're in the middle of working on that now. We'll have updates during the course of the year. For all those things, we do hear you. Let's go on to the next slide, number 6, and you can see the breakdown of total expenses. Then this is what compares to our assessment revenues mostly. And the big chunk is outside services and employee compensation. I think staff's doing an excellent job of looking for areas where we can farm out things that we don't do as efficiently as maybe we could for people who can do it because they're scaled to do it. Tree trimming comes to mind, something where our head of landscape did a great job of being able to find a way to save a lot of money there, but still maybe even offer a higher level of service. We're going to see. Just got up and running now. But outside services is generally a good thing. Getting information more timely, that's something that's on us to bring to you, and that's what I mentioned earlier. We want to make sure we're on top of how those are being paid out and that everybody's aware of how it's going to affect the budget. Employee compensation, lots of discussion about getting turnover under control, managing things more efficiently. I take my hat off to staff on that. I think they've made great progress in the time we've been asking those questions. And then you can take a look at the breakdown of the smaller expenses. Utilities and telephones, we may hear something from the Water Committee today. Well, we're not getting a lot of traction in improving our water usage. It's a big dollar item that's adding up, but it's not a huge chunk of our budget, but still, you should know that could affect our assessments, and managing water is very important. Other utilities are kind of in line, but we're watching out for them. And then insurance, again, nothing that you can do as residents necessarily, but you just need to be aware that's an item that we're actually having to do a lot of work on to get under control. And the rest you can kind of scan through. So on slide 7, we can summarize, and you can kind of see how everything looks at the year end from a reserve perspective. Again, not necessarily needing to read every line. Let's go to the totals. We started with $29 million in funds. And we were able to add $14 million in contributions and interest, and we spent a little, small amount over the $14,458,000 was our expenses. So our cash position ended up right where we started, which I feel extremely good about, given we're building reserves overall. I'll jump to the next slide so you can see why I feel good about it, pictorially, on slide 8. You can kind of see we've been able to ramp up reserves while increasing levels of service, solving major issues like dry rot and the wasteland remediation. So keeping increases under control, cost of living or less on our assessments. I definitely feel like overall for the year it was good. It can get better, and that's something that we're trying to deal with in February and March rather than wait for the budget process and year end. That's something we're, as a board, a lot of good people on the board trying to be proactive and bring you information mid-year that we used to bring you at the end of the year, and hoping to see that change and be a part of that. So to finish things up, if you take a look on slide 9, you will see one of our metrics to see how we're doing, and that is how are we selling in terms of properties. Huge spike in resales for December. I actually got it here, it was 79 units sold versus last year, 47. Probably just as important to note that the average sales price was down for December. So, lower end units were selling at a much higher rate. Maybe that's good for remodels and upgrades over time, we'll see. The average for the year came in just a little lower than it did last year, but very good trend for January. I went and pulled those numbers so our residents could be aware. This January, we only sold 24 units. Last year, we sold 32, but the average resale was $417,000 versus $390, so already up 7% for the year on the closed units this year. Net, you see a little more in some months, a little less in others. Really stable and strong compared to the surrounding areas. Given that there's good economy, but again, it's very competitive in this area in terms of real estate values. So I think overall the real estate is saying that we're heading in a good direction for third, because people are still willing to buy and they're paying increasing prices. So, let's see if I've got that information here. The lease report, we talked about that at length. We're trying to, work out a policy that will help keep things under 30%. We're also doing things to try to, enhance people who live here's value, in terms of maybe making a better alterations process. We're looking at a lot of things that will make people want to live here more and be willing to improve their property, and that'll reduce lease naturally, because people want to live here instead of lease their units. That's a big goal of ours also. The next meeting is March 3rd for the Finance Committee, 1:30 in the boardroom. And we are already working on a number of budget issues, so if you want to show up and hear the details of those, we look forward to seeing you then.
Okay, thank you, John. Any comments, comments or questions on the board? Okay, next, report of architectural controls and standards, Director Muchnick.
Thank you, Director Parsons. The Architectural Committee met this month, and we had two basic issues that we dealt with. One that we approved that we talked about earlier in this meeting, and that had to do with a exclusive use common area being converted into a enclosed room as opposed to a courtyard. The one I want to spend a little time talking to you about is the second issue, which our Director Jarrett spoke to you about earlier, but I want to make sure that you understand. We are actually very much in favor of people putting solar on their single-story units. We are not opposed to that. We denied this particular one because we have an arrangement with Lettner Roofing that they are responsible for taking care of the roofs on our manors. And they provide us with a 20-year guarantee for maintenance of those roofs when they do the new installations. And they have a very specific process for attaching the solar to our roofs so that they don't create a leak. If we allow an outside company to come in and attach the solar to our roofs, it could void our warranty on our roofs with Lettner Roofing. So therefore, we were kind of compelled to deny the request to put solar in this particular instance. If these people who want to put the solar on are willing to come back and have Lettner do the installation or the attachment to the roof, I'm sure that we can move forward with that project. But it's just that there was a discrepancy with their person, their installer wanting to also do the attachment, and we just couldn't allow that to happen. And the next meeting of the committee is next Monday on the 24th.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go ahead with the report Maintenance Construction Committee. Some topics were taken up last time, and I'll just go through some of them. Review of the Energy Coalition, or TEC's Energy Priority Work Plan and deliverables. TEC completed Phase 1, Phase 2. It was decided that we move forward in-house, at least for the time being, to look at how we could handle some things without using a consultant. But a lot of the things that are involved here involve independent electric vehicle charging stations and parking garage circuits. So that'll be coming back to our next meeting. Also, building and carport lighting timers. This could help us, we think, in the long run, by putting timers in versus just having to tweak and send somebody out to adjust the electric flow for the lights. So we're looking into that and the cost associated with it. And also taking up the topic again of dryer timer reset cost and the painting of building 2129. So these are topics that are coming up. If you're interested, be sure you come to the meeting. The next meeting is March 2nd, 1:30 p.m. in the boardroom. Okay, next is the Parking and Golf Cart Task Force. I'll report on that also.
Steve, I think
Yes.
bypass the Communication Committee.
I was waiting. Yeah, you just skipped.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let's go to communications then. Director McCary.
Huge report.
I was gonna let you off the hook.
The committee last met in October. The next meeting is still to be announced.
Okay, that was too quick. We better have you take another topic here. Okay, on the Parking and Golf Cart Task Force, as you might remember last year in the wedding cake area, we installed about 12, I think it was, parking spots for golf carts. They were actually installed. This year, we're looking at possibly upwards of 20. Sites have been identified, and you should see some work being done out there by the end of March. Maybe a lot of work will be completed by the end of March. This is what Ernesto was passing on to me. So people in the wedding cake, if you would take a look and give us feedback on that, we'd really appreciate that. The parking spots that were installed this last year will look really nice. And one other thing we decided on recently, we had members of the Energy Committee, myself from the Parking Task Force, and Ernesto, that we're looking at putting in additional car parking spots. And one thing we don't want to do is put in golf cart spots where we need to put in automobile spots for parking. So we agreed then that all three groups would come together and really have a comprehensive plan before we go any farther than what we have on the book for this year. So that's what I have on that. Garden Villa Rec Room Subcommittee, Director Jarrett.
All right, this committee met on February the 10th. We meet 3 times a year, and in the last quarter of the year, the staff goes out and inspects all of 53 rec rooms and finds what needs to be done. And last week, they presented us with an update on the component lists of all the rec rooms that the residents pay for those components out of their monthly assessments. This budget year is expected to make quite a few replacements or renovations, like they'll do 3 kitchen renovations, 3 full kitchen paintings, 10 full paintings of men's and ladies' restrooms, complete with new mirrors, and a lot of different other replacements they'll be making. It is expected that all budgeted funds will be used this year, and expanding the budget for coming years was discussed as well. We are going to have to increase our assessments by a small amount, a little bit more than what we thought we would, and I'm going to have to work with John Pearlstone on the dollars with that and staff, because it's we've got to make a plan here. A lot of the components are getting old, and we're going to have to start replacing some of the larger dollar items. So we're going to have to work on that. But I do want to mention that the staff does inspections on the 3-story buildings 3 times a year. So they really keep up with what's going on with on the 3-story buildings, maintenance and needs, and the rec rooms. So the next meeting, the rec room subcommittee, will be held on June the 10th.
Thank you very much. And just to add to it, our newest board member, Director Gibson, has been getting his feet wet with the Gardenville Association, becoming familiar with a lot of things that are going on. His head's probably swimming a little bit, but he's making great strides. Okay, on to the report of Landscape Committee, Director Pearlstone.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. So I'll be sitting in for Director Jarrett today. She gave me some great notes, so I'm pretty much going to stick with those. Start off by saying we once again had good turnout at the February 6th meeting. I'm going to add my only personal note on this entire report, which is I feel like it's worth mentioning the level of communication, thanks to Director Jarrett, I really believe, and other directors who are very interested and active on landscape has really improved. We're getting the information we need from different areas, and we're able to share that with staff, and we're seeing good feedback and good results. So that's something, if you feel like landscape isn't delivering for you, we are listening, and it's starting to work. So there was removal of 7 trees was approved and 1 was denied during that meeting. Work is ongoing on the slopes and tree maintenance work. Got great feedback on people who have seen their slopes worked on. It seems to be working out very well. Any questions have been answered very promptly for people who are wondering about things. So again, the communication is always the key. With the new tree contract, this was something that our staff did, give them a lot of credit. They found ways to make us more cost effective and hopefully really upgrade levels of service. So with the new tree contract, 7 new positions were moved from tree trimming to shrub and turf maintenance, which will bring the landscape department to full staffing, which I believe Kurt Weeman said that was the first time in years, correct? That it had been in full. So That's just outstanding. We found a way to get there. It's hard to find those people these days to get in and do that particular type of work. Any trees that need to be removed in an emergency situation can be done by those experienced tree staffers on duty. All other trees will be trimmed by the contractors according to species as previously approved. So a good process in place to hopefully see good work on the trees, which we've got a lot going on this year on that. Aeration isn't completed yet due to weather constraints, but it's ongoing and it's in progress, and we definitely expect to see improvements because they hadn't done aeration around Third for quite some time. I think there was discussion in some areas that never had it done, but in any case, should be significant. Landscape modernization in Gate 11 is on hold for now, but we're looking at other areas where we can place drought-tolerant plants. The need to save water is of the utmost importance. It may come down to keeping grass while increasing assessments in the future. So those are the kind of things that are being debated at the Landscape Committee, and certainly you could share your feedback if you like. One component of that, which starts to really, I think, have meaning in that discussion, is Gate 14, the drought-tolerant project, which was done as a pilot called Landscape Modernization Project. It's essentially completed with a few tweaks that still are in process to clean it up. But in general, it's done. It looks extremely good. And you know what, by the time the irrigation or some more rains hit, it's going to start to fill in and look even better. People are using it, enjoying it. I happen to live in Gate 14, and I can speak to that. People are walking their dogs on the paths, and it's a great setup, very park-like setting. And we just found out last week that, and Lynn will say this is what I care about, even though it's not the only thing I care about, but just last week we found out that so far we're going to receive at least 98% of the promised rebate for the project, which means out of our expenses we're going to see about $62,000 refunded, which made the project very timely and importantly might serve as a foundation for future work that could be savings in installation and big savings in maintenance and water usage moving forward. So as a community, that's what we need to decide, if we want to do more of that or not, and we're seeing how this one is handled in terms of maintenance and implementation. So far, so good. Kurt Weeman, our landscape director, continues to work with Orange County Fire authorities on cutting out the overgrowth in the fire risk areas. It's a big job, and they, as fire departments are prone to do, have decided they want to change things. So they're coming back and asking for something different than they asked him for during the budget process. So we're waiting for information on that. You can catch up with the schedule for the landscaping crews and their plans. We get a lot of questions. How do I know where people are working? So it's on the website. Every week there's an update of where they're going to be. So check that out if you want to know when they're coming to you or if they're coming to you currently. Don't forget tree request forms for tree removal or trimming can be found on our website. Additionally, the Third Mutual Landscape Manual is also on the website. So messages, good place to start with your landscape questions is the website. It might be there. Otherwise, there's lots of people available to help you. I also, as a final point, I and Lynn, Director Jarrett, want to mention once again what a great job Kurt Weeman is doing, which I absolutely second as the landscape director. He not only has a large staff to manage, although never large enough, he has to work with the board and other managers closely, not to mention the other boards of the other mutuals. And he manages a large budget, is always looking for ways he can do more with less, which he absolutely has found. He collaborates with several federal and state environmental agencies, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, that have jurisdiction over the creek and require us to maintain the creeks by their rules. So that is a very thorough summary of what's going on in the world of landscape, and the next meeting is Thursday, March 5th, 9:30 a.m. in the boardroom, and love to have you if you want to talk about landscape.
Thank you. Director Gibson, did you want to say anything about the crew that rolled in on Gate 11 recently?
Frankly, there was 2 crews, or maybe 3, but all of a sudden they came through and they blitzed our area, and it's the best that it's looked in, probably several years. The last time that they really did a thorough dusting and cleaning of the areas where they get the front and the back and everything else on it was in June of last year. So that's 6 months, things kind of accumulate, and we've made a real request of Kurt, and I hope it's going to work out, that not only for our gate, but for other areas, that they're on basically a quarter system where they get through and they do all of the work on it. And we've also tried to give him some guidance on what people like in relationship to their curb cuttings and all of this type of situation. But as you've mentioned, he's just he's a jewel to work with, and we greatly appreciate it. And I think we're headed in the right direction to where we can get back up and everything will be improved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Director Karimi on the Water Subcommittee.
We didn't have a meeting in January, but we received the bills for the water. As I said it before, there was good news, bad news. The number of violation for the tier 3 and 4 dropped slightly, but the bad news is that we had repeat violation by some clusters. So if you receive those letters, that means that either you or somebody in your cluster is in violation of water usage, the allocated amount of water that we are supposed to use. You're going to hear this broken record till something is done about it, because I'm not going to stop talking about this violation. Although we send a letter, we ask you to look around. You don't need our help. You can do it yourself. You can look around your house and see what's going on, what you can do to fix the problem. But if you need help, please don't hesitate to call us, and we will help you to identify the source of problem if it's not yourself. But if it's yourself, just look in the mirror, turn off the faucet, and stop, violating the tier 3 and tier 4 use of water. The problem is that our treasurer said the cost of water is going up. Pretty soon, we're going to be out of spring to the summer, and we have gates that are still using potable water. Our cost of water is going to go up. And you know what that means? That means it's going to impact assessment. Somebody has to pay for it. So please help the community to conserve water so we don't have to deal with the assessment regarding the water. Because if we keep violating the use of tier 3, tier 4, something needs to be done if they're a repeat offender. And that is not good. So help the community, please. Our next meeting is TBA. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I learned on that was we have low flow toilets, and over the past 5 years, we never had trouble with them. And it was around Christmas time, we flushed the toilet, took off to our son's house, came back the next day, and he was still running. And I go, what is this? So I took the top off, and the little chain down there had hooked on something in the bottom, and it was keeping the flap open, and it just kept running. So luckily, we were only gone 1 day. But that was a heads up to us that we don't leave the place until we hear everything off.
Yeah, that's what my point. If you can look around, if you don't find it, you can ask us, we can come and help. But I'm pretty sure that every one of us are capable of identifying those little issues that going to impact everybody.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Steve?
Okay, yes. Oh, we have a speaker? Okay,
Wei Ming Tao.
okay.
This is related to water. Do we have a process to report the violation? I had a new neighbor came over and wash his car in the carport, and that's violation. So I called the resident service. Resident service transferred me 2 times to compliance, and the compliance called back a few days later, so you have to catch them in time. And I was told that it's going to cost $300 to call a call into compliance is $300 in cost. So we should have a process that for people that violate the water consumption, that is easier and faster, and they get notified. So I just dropped the issue. I said, well, why wasting my time and our money to get compliance? So we need to have a better process for reporting of violation.
That's an excellent point. I guess we have to talk about that and see how we're going to be improving that process, because that is a known violation and everyone should be able to report that. People should not wash their cars with the potable water because, that's by itself. But if we are not dealing with it properly, then that's something that we have to discuss and see how we're going to improve the process.
Okay.
I also reported to compliance somebody washing their truck, and compliance was totally not aware of it.
I suggest that sometimes probably, this is a little bit over the board. But if you see somebody doing violation, grab your camera, take a photos, and send it in. Because then you cut them in act. Because sometimes it's hard to go there and say, no, I didn't do it. And they're not, unless you bring witnesses and all of that. But if you take a photo,
Well,
please.
but I don't want to be obvious and take a photo,
Well, if we want to help each other, sometimes
Sure.
we have to be
But I think
obvious.
compliance should be aware of it,
Yeah.
that when you report it, and not just brush it off.
Is it not that security can come over and check and do an incident report?
Both security and compliance are aware of it and typically respond unless there are more high priority.
But compliance
okay.
and security is one, right?
Okay. Go ahead.
With regard to the water issue, I've brought this up before. We have lots of lines of the drip system going in, and they're sitting above the landscaping. They need to have mulch put on top so it will retain the moisture. You are losing so much water by the evaporation by them not being covered. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. That's why the water subcommittee is part of the landscaping, and we discussed that, and that landscaping would definitely pick that one up and look
Good
at
point.
that.
Any other speakers? Okay, Doug?
I think the real key to that is if you have a request of anything, landscaping or whatever, put a request in and get a ticket number and see. And I think that maybe the mulching can be brought to your own house if you put your request in. I know in our area, they've reseeded a lot of lawns with requests, and that's just something. So that's an important way to handle it, I think. Try it.
Just so
Yes.
you know, I put in a request for mulch, and there isn't any. And
Oh.
I guess that new mulching, or the old mulching machine got put on hold because of the air quality control. So Kurt's
Yeah.
waiting until March.
It's been milk
Oh,
on.
But
okay.
I know in my area, for a year and a half, the lines have not been mulched over.
Okay. Siobhan?
We have a new mulching machine scheduled to arrive later this week, and then the permit is forthcoming from AQMD. Once that's
Oh,
both
okay.
in place, we will have mulch again.
That's great news. Well, we've been waiting for that. Okay, anyone else? We'll move ahead to 13G here. Report of the Resident Policy and Compliance Committee. Director Jarrett.
Okay, we actually met on January 15th before the last board meeting, and I gave you an update at that time, promising that we'd be bringing you some resolutions for your approval that we were working on. Well, today we did just that. We brought you the lease cap and lease waiting list, the harassment policy, the nuisance policy, good standing policy, and the election rules. So you can see by those resolutions, we were quite busy. I don't think I have much more to say, but we don't have a next meeting date planned, but we will let you know. We will make an announcement.
Thank you very much. Report of Village Energy Task Force, Director Frankel.
The task force met on January 10th. The next meeting was on March 4th. I attended an agenda meeting last week with Ernesto and Bert Moldau and Carl Mendoza. And I have a copy of that if anybody would like to see what's on our agenda. We discussed electrical vehicle charging. I passed on the fact that solar has an ROI of 23 versus the 12 originally, and that's because there have been some costs that have gone up from SCE. We discussed streetlight status, which is going well, and that's all I have on that.
Okay, next meeting?
March 4th.
Okay, at 1 p.m. Okay, on to GRF committee highlights. Community Access Committee, Director McCary.
The committee met on January 9th. The committee meets every other month, so the next meeting is going to be March 12th at 1:30 p.m. here in the boardroom.
Thank you. On to the Finance Committee, Director Pearlstone.
There was no meeting since our last board meeting, but the good work from the GRF Board and Finance Committee continues, very, very diligently looking at everything, and I think doing great work so far in their new tenure. And they're going to update us tomorrow, February 19th, 1:30 in the boardroom, so come and see for yourself.
Thank you. Landscape Committee, Director McCary.
I'm reporting for Director Engel. The GRF Landscape Committee met February 12th. The Aliso Creek area was still subject of numerous resident comments. Most recognized improvements over the past year, but still cited other problems. One problem mentioned was branches and other debris apparently caught by low-hanging willows during recent storms. Director Jarrett took a stroll along the creek yesterday, and apparently, according to her, much of the debris has been cleaned up. Also, the cattail still seems to be a major problem. Kurt did mention looking at longer-range ideas which may help alleviate but not eliminate the cattail problem. California Fish and Wildlife Guidelines dictate much of what can be done about foliage around the creek. Even the weeds must be native. Kurt mentioned that he is forming planting crews whose job will be not only to replace dead plants, but to nurture them with special attention until they are well established. He's also upgrading our nursery to concentrate more on plants that will work well in our area. In terms of entry gates, Kurt presented a draft proposal by a consultant for renovation of the softscape at gates 1 through 11 and 16, which ran in the area of $500,000 total, including as much as 30% contingencies depending upon current unknowns and which construction vendors are used. Kurt received several kudos for improvement in the past year. The next GRF Landscape Committee is scheduled for May 13th.
Thank you. Maintenance Construction, Director Frankel.
We discussed Clubhouse 1. The architect has created an executive summary and a detailed assessment report, and I have it with me, and then we'll share it with anyone who's interested. The report addresses where we go from here, and the assessment report discussed in detail the condition of of Clubhouse 1, and the next question is what will the scope of work be? And we acknowledge the fact that anything over 500,000 will require a meeting of all boards, but they presented three alternatives. The first one was a $15 million alternative, which was a complete renovation. The second one was a $26 million alternative, which was a combination renovation and some new buildings. And the third one was a $120 million proposal for complete demolition, site improvements, replacing all of the buildings. And what's going to drive this thing is a Clubhouse 1 committee, which will be appointed. But basically, it's going to be up to the committee to develop the needs. What do we need? And that will determine the scope of work. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and the next meeting is April 8th.
9:30 in the boardroom. Okay, on to the PAC Renovation Ad Hoc Committee, Director Pearlstone.
The committee has not met since December 12th, but is heavily tied in terms of big picture discussions with what Director Franklin just talked about, trying to figure out all these different needs and where funds are going to come from. However, there is a current bid-in process for Phase 1 of the Performing Arts Center, which is all the important needs, and we're waiting for those numbers to ensure that we stay tied to the budget, and hopefully we'll be moving forward with Phase 1 during 2020. And there's no date set for the next meeting. Probably once those bids are secured, we'll schedule a meeting.
Thank you. On to Media and Communications, Director McCary.
The Communications Committee met on January 22nd. As Jeff has already pointed out about the magazine, we spent some time talking about that, and kudos went out to the Media and Communications Department for doing such a great job. In addition, let's see, Ms. Chuck Holland presented a recommendation for a supplemental appropriation from the contingency fund in the amount of $50,000 to engage a consultant firm to conduct a review of broadband services operations and provide alternate options for providing cable TV and internet to the community. A motion was made to use a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $50,000 from the contingency fund to engage the broadband group to seek alternate options for providing cable TV and internet. The motion was second and passed, and the motion carried. After some discussion, the next meeting is scheduled for February 19th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. here in the boardroom.
Okay, thank you very much. Mobility and Vehicles Committee, Director Frankel.
The committee met on January 20th. The next meeting, met on February 5th. The next meeting is April 1st at 1:30 in the boardroom. We discussed in detail the new Boost program, which is an ability to call a vehicle like an Uber call, and it's highly utilized, but there have been some difficulty with the drivers finding our addresses, and they're working on that. But other than that, it looks to be very successful. And I don't know if you have any further comments on that, Jeff, but it is a good program.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, did you have anything else on that?
No, I would just indicate that talking to Chris, he's had a couple of follow-up meetings, and it seems to be the new program, especially with the 6 days on the permanent schedule, is working great.
Good.
We have a few little glitches that we're working on, but it's so far so good.
So I haven't heard a thing since I got implemented. So sounds good. Okay, Security and Community Access Committee, Director Muchnick.
Thank you, Director Parsons. The Security and Community Access Committee has not met since the last board meeting that we had, and I updated you then. The good news is that we will be meeting on Monday the 24th, and CEO Parker, I assume that at that meeting we'll have Chief Moy, and we'll also have Chief Rojas. So you'll be able to have a chance, the community, to come and say goodbye to Chief Moy and welcome to Chief Rojas at that meeting. So if you want to attend, our next meeting is Monday, February 24th, 1:30 here in the boardroom.
Thank you very much. Disaster Preparedness Task Force, Director McCary.
Okay, the task force met on January 28th. A couple of things that we discussed. One has been mentioned at our last meeting, the new office location for the Disaster Task Force. They share the office with the Globe. Their hours are 10 a.m. to noon, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays. And it's right outside the door there, so they're very much more visible now. There's also an opportunity in there to review some of the upcoming CPR classes that's being put on by the Disaster Task Force. And also, we talked about the need still to have additional good neighbor captains. The reason it is so important to have good neighbor captains is in the event there is a major disaster or major issue, the people that are going to receive the help that they need most are the ones that have good neighbor captains, because the good neighbor captains are the ones that are going to be funneling information to the command centers. So we still are in desperate need of more good neighbor captains, and you can go into the Disaster Task Force office to get more information about that. The next meeting is scheduled for March 31st, 9:30 a.m. right here in the boardroom.
Thank you very much. Report of Laguna Woods Village Traffic Hearings. Director Muchnick.
Okay, thank you again. Once again, we met prior to the last board meeting, and I gave you an update at that meeting about what has been going on in the traffic hearings. The traffic hearings are tomorrow at 9 a.m. here in the boardroom, and if there's a need for an afternoon meeting, it'll be at 1 o'clock in the Sycamore room.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to future agenda items. I see those are on here. Any changes, additions, corrections we need to make? Anything from staff that you'd like to see? Okay, we'll keep that as is. Director's comments, and we'll start over here, but we'll start with our COO. Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, Reza?
Next time you turn on your faucet, remember my face. I'm going to keep talking to you. Thank you.
Director Frankel. John? Anything?
I just want to, just as a reminder and highlight what Siobhan said about voting, it's really important that we do vote, and so you will, I've gotten lots of information in my mail about voting, so please take the opportunity to vote.
Thank you. Okay, Lynn?
It's a good meeting, thank you.
No comment?
No? Okay. Can't leave Grant out over here, he's taking the notes.
I have nothing, but thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, at this time, I'll recess the meeting and we'll convene in closed session.